Well, greetings, everyone. It is a delight to be back in conversation with one of my favorite people on the planet, Pam Gregory. And I love being in conversation with you, Pam, both because I have such respect for you as an astrologer, but also for you as a person and for the depth at which you're working these energies that we're in this time and doing it in service to the collective. So thank you.
Oh, bless you. That's, it's a huge honor, Heather, because you are doing magnificent work. You go beyond normal astrology. You're a shaman, you're a clinical psychologist, you're looking at the shifts of the ages and the really big picture. And so you add a whole other dimension to what we're normally looking at in terms of our bread and butter planets, if you like. So I love that perspective as well. It's very different. It's really is big picture of consciousness.
Thank you. But maybe we could start our conversation with you're talking a little bit about this profound event that you just held there in the UK, helping empower people in this time of change.
Yes, it was wonderful. I mean, as a double Pisces, I don't come out from under stones very often, so it was a rare occasion for me. But it was with my good friend and colleague Sue Stone, who isn't an astrologer, but she has a coaching business essentially teaching people how to empower themselves. So I did the first half of the afternoon talking about the astrology of the times and going beyond the astrology to help people understand using the quantum model, how they could empower themselves. And then Sue brought it back to the kind of day-to-day practicalities. But it was so uplifting for people. I think we wanted to make it very positive, very inspiring, very forward looking. And we genuinely feel that. I mean, we really, really do. But it was a wonderful afternoon. That the amount of love in the room was palpable. And I said at the end, it's like a kind of energetic bow wave that's going out ahead of us, but also benefiting the collective to kind of bounce back as your reality in a very short time. So know that the future is invisible, the future is not set in any way, the future is highly malleable, and we are creating it here in this room. We are doing it. We are the co-creators. And so yeah, it felt very, very positive, and people had come a long way. I was astonished. So yeah, it was. So I'll go back under stones now.
Well, what's extraordinary about that is you're really doing that process of supporting, a community, supporting each other in being empowered and not getting caught in fear with the turmoil of the times, but in a larger sense, seeing the vision of what we are capable of moving into in this time and co-creating it together. And I truly believe, as so many of the shamans and spiritual teachers talk about, if only 1% of us wake up and hold that higher consciousness, the energies of the collective consciousness will shift.
I was talking about exactly that, Heather, because I was quoting the work of Dr. David Hawkins, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes.
Scale of consciousness. And, he says some remarkable things. If one person is vibrating at this, is just his using his numerical scale of consciousness, which is very well known, I think. But if one person is vibrating at the level of just reason, it counterbalances 400,000 people at courage and below fear, guilt, shame, all of those things. And if there's one person who's vibrating at the level of love, not a pink, fluffy, romantic love, but a state of being of love, I am love, then it counterbalances potentially 750,000 people in the collective. And I said, probably there are many of you in this room today vibrating at the level of love. So think of how many millions of people you are helping to uplift this afternoon just by sitting here in a positive state of being. So it was wonderful. And of course, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton talk about this idea of just takes 1 to 2% of us. And it actually comes back, as I'm sure you know, Heather, to a law of physics known as downward causation, that high frequency is much more potent and influential on the lower than the other way around. And so it doesn't take many of us, as you say.
Well, and it so fits with Greg Braden's research about this small group of meditators affecting the surrounding culture and reducing violence and crime because they're sitting in meditation, holding that higher vibration and higher consciousness. So it just reminds us all that we have that capacity to move into those higher frequencies and be co-creating a new world together.
Totally. And of course, Lynn McTaggart's work, if you read the book, it's a real classic, little old now, but still a wonderful book, The Intention Experiment. She's very rigorous in her scientific method, as you know. And she was talking about this huge experiment she had with meditators to lower violence in the Middle East when there was a lot of war there. And it was really quite spectacular what she achieved. So, so don't just think of yourself as guilty for not being out there carrying a placard. Think of yourself as an energetic activist.
Beautiful. That's exactly what I tell people in my readings all the time, that in many ways, I think, is the most powerful form of activism in this time, is holding that higher consciousness and just embodying it. So beautiful that you did that.
And I think so often we think it doesn't matter much because it's invisible. But what we're going to learn as we move forwards is that actually we're doing incredible things, not just with air, but with plasma. And once we start to understand the science of that, we can get a grip on the science of evolution, almost, the science of co-creation. And we are headed there, I think, very, very quickly. And that's why it's so exciting. We start to become masters of our energy, masters of our frequency. And once we do that, we can change the world.
Well, that's what's so extraordinary about that research coming out on plasma, but also Rupert Sheldrake's work and others talking about that understanding that everything is in an energy field. Everything is interconnected. So the changes that we make in our own lives and our own hearts are affecting people around the globe, because our consciousness is all a part of this larger network. So we really do have a capacity to move into this whole new way of being. And you and I both talk about that, and we can maybe get into that more later, the terms of the larger shifts that we're on the cusp of, and this capacity to move into radically new forms of consciousness and new ways of being.
Yeah, I profoundly believe that, Heather. I profoundly believe that. And what we have to do, I think, is keep our eye on that goal. I often talk about just focus on the love revolution as your docking station and do not deviate. There's a really big scary thing over here. There's a lot of drama over here. Just keep the spiritual focus on. And I was actually quoting many, many years ago, I was in my mid-20s, and I was going off traveling on my own through India and Nepal for 5 months. So I did a very basic martial arts course. And one of the things we had to do was to split a builder's plank, quite a thick builder's plank. And if you focused on the plank, you really hurt your hand. But the teacher said to us, and this really stuck with me for all those decades, he said, focus 6 inches below the plank where you want to get to. And I split 3 in a row. Like
that's great.
But it was, I hadn't suddenly become stronger in that moment. All I'd done is shift my perception to where I wanted to get to. And it seemed hugely important as a concept then, but it's very relevant to now, I think. Don't focus on the obstacles, focus on where you want to get to.
And the other thing that coming out of martial arts, I have a dear friend who's very involved in Aikido. And one of the things she talks about all the time is the importance of not reacting. For example, if you're in interaction with someone or someone's coming at you, to not react, stay centered, stay in alignment with your own center. And I think in this time, being in alignment with our true self, being in alignment with our soul self, being in alignment with the energies of the earth and sky is what can keep us in that calm in the eye of the storm. Even though the winds are swirling around us, we can be in that place of calm and stillness and alignment. And then, as you said, really focus on being in the heart and coming from that energy of love, which takes us into that higher vibration and allows us to see the bigger picture that's unfolding. When we get caught in fear, we lose our power. We give our power away.
Totally. And we scatter our energy. Absolutely, Heather. We give our power away to the people or the circumstances that seem to be scary. And we just lose all this sense of center. So, I so often think if you look out at the world, there are just thousands of problems that seem overwhelming. And what can we as a tiny individual do to influence all of those? But really, the more you turn inwards, there's only one thing to focus on, which is your frequency, which is your stillness. And as you say, in martial arts or many of the ancient modalities, and I think this was true in the mystery schools as well, the start point was find your center, find your stillness, and everything operates from that like a kind of control center or radio dial. So we choose day to day how we want to live in our state of being, and we beam it out. We're not buffeted by the external. We turn that whole concept around and say, no, I start from here and I beam it out. And then you're in a much stronger position, I think.
Well, and the other thing that I think is so important in that is, we've been culturally on the planet locked into that third dimensional reality perspective of everything is in a linear development, everything is matter. When we come back into alignment and come into the heart and connect with those energies of the cosmos and cosmic consciousness, we realize that reality is all around us. I mean, that's the teachings of the mystery schools also. Face your fear, move through your fear, and open to that higher consciousness. And then you're operating from a whole other level of reality. Then things can change in the blink of an eye. We're not trying to solve these problems in some step-by-step linear manner. And the people in authority, the people in positions of power are not the ones who are going to help us solve those problems. It's us.
Totally. Well, yeah, beautifully said, 100%. It's down to us as powerful co-creators. And that's what's so exciting about this new episode we're moving into, because I really think we're going to get that. We're going to understand our mastery in a way that we've never done before, because we've never had to. Circumstances haven't been such that we've been forced to. But I think, this really has been a cloud with a silver lining, this period of time. And yes, it's caused a great deal of personal suffering, no doubt. And that's been really tragic. But I think things like the lockdowns during the pandemics have made us realize how precious human connection is. And when we come together as a group, how the group energy is magnified, again, to become even more powerful than working alone. So I think we're entering just a phase of human evolution. I think it's actually the biggest jump in human evolution ever. Do you feel that, Heather?
Yes, absolutely. And I'd love to talk more about those larger cycles, but let's start with talking about just the intensity of these next few months, because we both see this astrologically as a really powerful time as we move through these next few months and some of the eclipses and the Uranus-Saturn square. But say a little bit about your perspective on all of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Way back in January, I did a themes for 2022, which many of us did. And I really saw this as the crescendo period that we're moving into, partly because of the eclipses, but also it's that final waning square between Saturn and Uranus. And we know that's the old world versus the new world, control versus freedom, centralization versus decentralization. And so Saturn has in many ways had the upper hand historically, particularly because Pluto's been moving through Capricorn that Saturn rules. So top-down structures have had a lot of power in our lifetimes, and particularly since 2008. But as we move forwards, because Uranus is the planet of the future, Uranus is ultimately always going to win out. It's the higher mind, it's the galactics, it's truth, it's awakening. And particularly when we come to that that total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November, your midterm election day, going to go
Great
smoothly.
synchronicity.
That's going to go really smoothly. And from that point on, I think Uranus, well, I think Uranus has been very strong all the way through, but it's coming into much greater prominence around November as well. But this final clash, this final crescendo, this final pincer movement between the old and the new has to see some kind of resolution, doesn't it? Which is going to win out in that battle? And there are many things, not just the fact that Uranus is of the future, but many other things that suggest that we are moving into a very different episode. I mean, how do you feel about all that, Heather?
Oh, beautifully said. And the other thing that I think is so significant about that Saturn-Uranus square is it's a third quarter square.
Yeah, waning.
So it's really, from that perspective, a crisis in consciousness. And I think it really is guiding us to look at these systems and paradigms and structures and beliefs that we've been adhering to, and to be more clear about what we're needing to let go of in order to move into the new Aquarian paradigms and be given the insights by Uranus as to what new directions that we can take. So I think it's a profound time to be stepping back from the paradigms that we've been in and realize those are dissolving. Not only are the systems and the power over models deconstructing, but those beliefs that we've had culturally are in a process of transition and transformation. And the other piece, I think, with that square that's so profound is this period of time up through January 2023, where Uranus is in such a tight orb with the North Node, North Lunar Node. And for me, the South Node in Scorpio, North Node conjunct Uranus and Taurus, is a call for us individually and collectively to look at what needs to come out of the darkness, Scorpio.
Yeah.
What are those issues that we haven't faced? And I certainly see in some of the turmoil in our global situation, all of these patterns that have been in the darkness are surfacing. And that needs to happen. It's unsettling to a lot of people. But I think what we need to stay clear about is it's allowing Uranus to bring that light of clarity and guidance into what we're needing to let go of to move into the new paradigms. It's supporting us in doing the healing work that we need to do to bring those things into consciousness, see them, face them, heal them, release them. Because I do believe we need to heal before we can fully move into co-creating this new world together. We can't bring the shadows of the past and the trauma of the past into this new age.
Yeah, beautifully said. And particularly if we look at that that solar eclipse in Scorpio that's coming up on the 25th of October, that is exact to the minute on the IC of the EU chart.
Wow.
To the minute, 2 degrees of Scorpio. So, and that of course is therefore opposite the midheaven. So that's bringing up issues around natural resources. We're aware of the gas and oil situation in Europe, around land resources, perhaps around leadership and government, because it's opposing the 2 degrees Taurus midheaven. And I think leadership and government in the EU will change very dramatically. But it's also, as you say, about the shadow side. It's about toxicity of all kinds, isn't it? It's about any sense of betrayal that we've had coming to the fore. It's also that whole financial axis. It's not only natural resources and food and agriculture, and those issues are very clear in the world, but it's also banking and investments and pensions and mortgages and the whole. The last time I think we had a hard aspect between Saturn and Uranus, it was in September, October 2008. And that didn't go that well either. So a lot is going to happen. And also that Saturn Uranus at 18 degrees of the fixed. The ascendant for the EU is at 17 degrees of Leo. So 17 of the fixed. So
that's really reverberating there. And here in the US with the Pluto return, certainly.
Because, if you look at sort of letting the old go, this is a rebirth for America, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and I think it's challenging us to look at those core values and to look at the origins of the country and what's been in the shadow of our history, again, to face that and heal that. So it's such a profound time of transformation on the planet. And I think as we hold that larger perspective, as you were saying earlier so beautifully, it helps us not get caught in the tumult or identified with the crises going on around us, but to see that as the labor pains of this movement into a new birth, into new ways of being. And the other thing about the Saturn Uranus square that I think is important, I feel that when you're in a square and you can get those energies to collaborate instead of being at odds with each other, it's an incredibly powerful aspect. So Uranus is giving us clarity about what needs to change, what needs to transform in terms of our system structures, how we deal with our resources, how we relate to our bodies, how we relate to the earth. And if we really take in those messages, then Saturn, the co-ruler of Aquarius, is helping us know how to step into and manifest the new forms.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah, a wonderful observation. Isn't it interesting that Saturn in Aquarius is looking at practical, long-term new networks for the future, and in aspecting Uranus in Taurus, very much about our food, our agriculture. And Heather, you and I were talking the other day about this new initiative in the UK called the People's Food and Farming Alliance, where Catherine McBean, unstoppable Catherine McBean, wants to take food production, but also buying back to the local networks. And that is such a perfect expression of Uranus in Taurus, kind of community, new ways of dealing with food and agriculture that are setting up longer term the new future networks and systems. It's part of that whole picture, isn't it? It's just spot on astrologically.
Well, and what is so thrilling about what Catherine and others are doing with the People's Health Alliance, now with how she's working with the farms, it's one of those grassroots movements that is really our taking back our power as people and saying we're not looking to others to solve these problems. We are creating a parallel reality that is operating from the Aquarian paradigms that are about equality and justice and fairness and empowering people and community and honoring diversity. And we're just going to live it. We're going to start doing it.
Yeah, and we are, and that's
beautiful.
That's what's so exciting, because if we think of Pluto as the planet of power, in Capricorn, it's very much given the top-down structures power, the governments, the corporations, the institutions. But once it moves into Aquarius, and really Jupiter and Saturn have been the John the Baptist, the precursors to that, it's shifting the power back to the people. But we don't have to wait until December 24 till Pluto fully moves into Aquarius for the people to have a sense of power. It's happening already. It's been happening since Jupiter and Saturn moved into Aquarius in December 2020. It's springing up all over the place with these grassroots movement, people's councils, assemblies, crops not shops. I mean, stand in the park. It's happening at dizzying speed right now. So exactly as you say, Heather, we don't have to wait for the old to collapse. We're just doing it. It's kind of the old Buckminster Fuller theory, isn't it? That you don't have to kind of fight against the old, that's crumbling anyway. You just have to get on with putting all of your energy into the new and doing it.
Well, and I think it's Audre Lorde who says that you can't undo the master's house with the master's tools. So we can't try to use the paradigms of the power over dynamic to solve the problems of this out of balance way of being. We have to move in these new directions. And that's what's so exciting, is the level of awakening that's happening in terms of people moving into higher consciousness. I hear that with the people that I do readings with from all over the world. And then to see these grassroots movements that are living it. And one of the things that I think is so exciting is this full moon that's coming up on October 9th really aligns with that Pluto Eris-Xena. I always have to call her Eris-Xena. That square, which I really see is guiding us to be, Eris-Xena in particular is about moving in radically new directions, finding your own creative spark and moving into these new paradigms individually and collectively.
Yeah, that's
And
really exciting. And the Eris archetype is very much about nobody will be excluded.
yes,
Everybody is included.
yes,
And what's also exciting as we move, it's actually the winter solstice, but it's being squared right now with this Libra equinox, is Ixion, the dwarf planet Ixion, is at 0 of Capricorn. And at a higher level of expression, that is about going beyond normal social norms and boundaries and rules and finding your bliss through simplicity and joy. So that's another expression of it.
And that's one of the things that I love about Eris-Xena. She's so unique in that, most of the planets in our solar system follow that same path in the sky, and she's 44 degrees off. So she's very much following her own unique path, not following the cultural norms or external expectations, but really listening to her own heart and spirit and following her own path. So it's such a model for us in this time, in tuning in, not being controlled by what's going on around us, but really listening to our own inner guidance, our own hearts, finding our own unique spark of creativity and our own gifts and stepping forward with that.
And it's sort of so interesting, Heather, because it sort of reinforces the Aquarian energy of the maverick, the individualist, the person who believes in freedom. No, I'm not going to obey the rules. I'm going to break the mold and do my own thing. Thanks very much. And off I go to a higher state of being. And that may lead us into much more galactic territory. That's my feeling. And I have such a sense that there's going to be so much development from out there.
Yes.
Uranus being the sky god, and whether that's in aviation, space travel, even galactic colonization, perhaps in not too far from now, but also this understanding of this isn't just air, it's plasma. It's all about the frequency, the energies coming from the sun and the greater galaxies. It's all about out there and how it's coming to affect us in bigger and bigger ways. And I don't know if I'm being very articulate here, but also the fact that we're discovering the Kuiper Belt objects. And I know you do a lot of work with Sedna as well. And there's several Kuiper Belt objects, and also, Sedna being an amazing dwarf planet with an incredibly long orbit of 11,500 years or something.
Yes.
Several of them are right on the cusp of changing sign, aren't they? They're either at the end or the beginning. Because Sedna, I think, is right at the end of Taurus, about to go into Gemini. Because this is something you follow, I know.
Yes, and I think part of what's so profound, as we've talked about before about Sedna, is her connection with the larger precessional cycle.
Yeah.
So, you and I both, in our other conversations have talked about how we're in this very intense time of transition. And I do see it as very similar to the labor pains before the new birth, which again, we can feel the stress of that, the pain, the confusion. But when we realize this is about a new birth, it helps us hold on to that perspective in the midst of the intensity. But it is truly profound that we are at this point of moving into a whole new 24,000 year precessional cycle. And it is, and the ancient prophecies talk about it as the possibility of moving into a golden age, moving into this higher level of consciousness. Because as you were saying, we're not only discovering so much about plasma, about the galaxy, and expanding our scientific understanding that way, but I think as we expand our consciousness, as we shift from being left-brained to being more right-brained, thinking more holistically, realizing we are a part of the interconnectedness of all that is, we are going to be moving into radically new ways of knowing things, of relating to each other. I think we're going to become telepathic again. We're going to remember the meaning of communion, not just communication, but communion with each other and the life around us. This is the possibility of this new precessional cycle that we're moving into. But again, I think part of what we have to face as we're seeing the impacts of climate change and the turmoil with our environment and the shifts the earth herself is going through, that reverberates in our DNA and our cellular memory about the past catastrophic crises we've been through on the planet in these times of shift.
Yeah.
At the end of a precessional cycle and the midpoint. So I think Sedna is a reminder of that. And part of what's so beautiful in her story is don't cling to the boat. She's in the storm. Her father, the myth of Sedna is that she's been pushed overboard by her father in the midst of this storm, betrayal of the fathers. But instead of getting caught in fear and struggling to get back in the boat, she lets go. She surrenders to the sea. She dives into the ocean and becomes the goddess of the sea, becomes one with those larger energies. And that's the call for us, is to surrender to these currents of change that we're being carried in, trusting that we're being carried into these new ways of being, and that we're being guided by the energies of the cosmos and the energies of the earth.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to hear that perspective, Heather, because I've been thinking, again, I touched on this on Sunday in the live event, but it's almost as if our regular familiar planets almost are more of a reflection of personality, whereas you get out to the Kuiper Belt objects and they have a very different quality of consciousness that is much more quantum. It connects us back to the sacred, to the divine. We have a sense of spiritual connection and oneness that I think we've lost in modern day life, which is so often there's a prevailing sense of meaninglessness. And I think we will remember perhaps ancient magical abilities that come back to us as our DNA is reactivated. And I agree with you, we'll be more telepathic, not just with each other, but with animals and trees and plants and all of nature. We become more light beings, we'll embody more light. And there's just this sense of blending with the oneness of it all in an exquisite, fine, high frequency, vibrational way, which we've just never experienced in our lifetimes. It's such a shift of moving to a very expanded consciousness, and we're absolutely on the doorstep of that. We're on the precipice of that, I think. So even though at 3D, the next few months could be lumpy, if we can keep our vision and that higher perspective that the old is falling away, but we are going to soar into a different state of being. And I think we are going to be helped enormously by cosmic and galactic energy in a way that we don't fully understand yet.
Yes.
But that's coming in absolute surges, and we can't stop that. That's happening for our greater good. And if we resist, I think the physical symptoms are more difficult. As you say, like Sedna, we've just got to surrender to what's coming in, and it will transport us to something much more beautiful.
I think, we both love Rory Duff's work, and I think that is so profound what he's been researching about these solar energies and cosmic energies that are impacting the earth energies, that are impacting us physically, emotionally, energetically, spiritually. And I think one of the things that I've found really helpful in my own meditation practice is both I go out as often as I can around the time of sunrise and honor the energy of the sun and attune to those energies coming from the galactic center through the sun to support us, heal us, transform us. And then at other times in my meditation, I'm just attuning to these beams of light coming to us from the cosmos that, as you and I talked about earlier, are filled with information. We are being healed and transformed and given these downloads of information about new ways of being and new ways of consciousness by these energies of light that are surrounding us, and that we can, as you said, consciously absorb and align with. Where we get in turmoil is if we resist these shifts that are happening, or stay caught in third dimensional reality and feel like we've got to have some sense of control in that realm. But it is about surrendering to these energies that are transforming us and guiding us.
Yes, it's wonderful how the science and the spirituality come together, isn't it? Because as you and I know from Rory Duff's work, Heather, the Earth is moving through the photon belt right now. So we're seeing these surges of photonic energy and light. And as you say, absolutely, light carries information, because we are made up of biophotons that determines the intercellular communication, doesn't it, throughout our body? Yes. So as this new energy comes in with the higher level photonic light, that whole communication network in our cells is going to upgrade at the same time through that new information. It's on, that's a physical thing that we can't stop, but nevertheless, it produces a spiritual upgrade, a spiritual result.
And I think it's moving us into radically new forms of healing that will involve light and sound and working with energy. I think we're going to look back at some of these last few thousand years and see how archaic we were, because I do think we're just moving into this radically new consciousness. And it's so exciting. There's so much possibility, but we as humans have to choose to align with that. And the other piece that I think is so important, and it's great to talk about this as we're approaching the equinox and moving into the time of Libra, that I think part of what we're moving back into remembering, you were talking earlier about that sense of oneness and our interconnectedness. The ancient meaning of Libra is that ancient Egyptian understanding of Ma'at, that everything in the cosmos, everything on our earth is meant to be in right harmony, right balance. When we can think about everything is vibration, everything is music. We're in the music of the spheres. And if we can attune to how we individually are in vibration and in harmony or in discordance, we can be aligning with finding that harmony in ourselves, and then that balance and harmony in our connection to the earth and sky. And then we feel that sense of oneness, and we're a part of that song, that music that's transforming us all. And we've been in a lot of cacophony, a lot of discordance during this past few thousand years, whereas humanity, we've separated ourselves from that knowing. But that to me is some of what's so hopeful and so exciting, is we're coming back into that remembrance, coming back into that way of being in right harmony again.
Yes, I think we're going to be moving into a world which we have no memory of, generally. We have no memory of. That is quite magical in terms of our manifesting ability, our healing ability. And so many people are experiencing much more psychic sensitivity now. And that may feel a little kind of destabilizing because it's coming in so quickly. But again, that's a remembrance of what we used to have. And I'm feeling it a lot. I always have a huge heart with animals, but I'm feeling that even more, that I can kind of tune into how they feel. And I chat to the ponies and the donkeys on my morning walk. How are we this morning, ladies? And I can kind of tune in to where they're at in an even bigger way than before. But all of us are developing this greater sensitivity. But you also just mentioned a moment ago, Heather, Egypt, and I'd love to talk about your trip that's starting tomorrow, and what you're going to be doing and exploring, and how that's part of this whole picture as well.
Oh, wonderful. Well, before I just say something about Egypt, I just want to follow up on what you said. I do think it's so profound that we're able to attune more and more to the plants, to the animals. And I think as we can connect with nature, that is so helpful to us in this time to be being supported and staying grounded. But also I feel the plants are trying to heal us and support us. The animals are sharing their wisdom to guide us. And as we attune to them and that psychic sensitivity is expanding, we can feel that connection with them and their support and guidance. But I think the shadow side of that, that many people that I do readings with are talking about, because we're opening more of that sense of our connectedness with everyone and that collective consciousness. Those of us that are particularly sensitive are often feeling the angst, the anxiety, the confusion, the fear in the collective consciousness. So I think taking time in nature, taking time to clear that, come back to yourself, come back to your own alignment, come back to that stillness is important in this time when we're more and more attuned to the energies and emotions around us.
Yes, and nature is always there. It's always reliable. And also it's the greatest antioxidant, way better than vitamin supplements. If you just put your bare feet on the earth, and it instantly starts to change your biomarkers, the viscosity of your blood, but it's pouring healing negative ions into your system. And just that connection with the earth is so simple, but so fundamental. And again, we tend to forget that in our modern lives where we wear shoes all the time. But even doing that can decompress that scattered energy and bring you back to center.
And bring you back to the heart.
Totally. Yeah.
So Egypt, well, I am leaving tomorrow for a 2-week trip to take a group really on a trip of spiritual initiation, to go to some of the ancient temples to work with how they relate to our different chakras, to end at the Great Pyramid and to connect to the energies that are there in Egypt that are reminding us of these ancient cultures. You know, the Sphinx was built 10,500 BC to be in direct alignment with the stars of Leo at the spring equinox. So these ancient cultures, going back so far into our past, held that higher knowing that I think we're moving back into now. So it's in our cellular memory, but it's also in the energies of the earth. And these ancient monuments that were, the Great Pyramid was built to align with certain stars in the sky like Sirius and Orion at the time it was built, but also encoded with a message for us in this time. So I think those ancient cultures were much more tuned into the precessional cycle and these larger shifts we go through than we've been in modern times, but they encoded in their monuments these reminders to us to again support us, help us see the larger picture that's unfolding, to not get caught in fear, but to realize we are coming into these alignments with the stars, with the earth, that are supporting us into this incredible new age and new precessional cycle and new consciousness. And part of what's extraordinary when you study these ancient sacred sites, they again understood the exquisite interconnectedness of the earth and sky, how our highest mountains and our sacred sites are in alignment with the brightest stars in the sky. You know, the Great Pyramid was built with the awareness that the Nile was mirroring the Milky Way. And then the pyramids on the Giza Plateau are mirroring the stars in Orion's belt. When we can begin to come back into that sense of we're a part of this oneness with all that is.
And they were really using astronomy and astrology as the language.
Absolutely. And understood energies. They were doing, we're going to go to the Saqqara area where they did energy healing, healing with sound and light. They were even doing brain surgery in ancient Egypt. There are, sculpted images of the tools that they used and the knowledge they had of anatomy. So it's extraordinary when we can step out of this perspective that humanity's been on this linear path of progression and we're advanced as we've ever been. And so we should be able to solve everything with our modern technology. When we can really learn from these very ancient cultures from, midway through our precessional cycle, it's reminding us that we're not going to solve the problems with these forms of technology. We're going to move into these new forms of consciousness. And as you said, understanding of quantum science, of energy fields, that's going to move us into technologies that are in harmony with all that is, not into the shadow side of what we could move into with the Aquarian age, which are forms of AI and technology that will further dehumanize us and disconnect us.
100% well said. 100%, Heather, well said. So yes, certainly these were not, the pyramids were not built with slaves rolling stones, were they?
No, energies like they still do in Tibet, of knowing how to work energetically. And you see this in some of the sites I visited in ancient Peru. They actually knew how to work energetically with vibration,
yes,
to move these stones and
levitate,
put them in precise places such that the Great Pyramid is exactly aligned with the cardinal directions and these other earth and sky alignments. That's extraordinary precision.
Yeah, it really is. And I've read quite a lot about that too. So I understand what you're sharing with us here. And they could barely replicate that today. It's so precise. I saw a documentary a while back and they were trying to replicate, the exact conjunction of stones, etc., and the precision of the alignment using diamond and laser cutters. And they couldn't do it as well.
That's right.
So, as you say, this has not been a linear progression, and the ancient peoples were primitives, and we are super sophisticated. Rather, actually, it's the other
way around.
They had an understanding of the cosmos and a frequency, which is way ahead of where we've been up to now. But that's what we're reconnecting to. Amazingly exciting. But you were talking about the King's Chamber as well the other day.
Well, and the King's Chamber again is so formed. The harmonics in that chamber are extraordinary. So if you tone or chant in the King's Chamber, it just reverberates in this amazing way. And there are these star shafts that are connecting to Sirius and Orion, which represent Isis and Osiris. And they designed the pyramid to be aligning with Orion as it's now, with the precessional cycle at its highest movement, which I think is symbolic of, Osiris, Orion, is symbolic of the god who dies and is reborn. And as we align with that, it's about our own resurrection, our capacity for resurrection as humanity. And I think it's extraordinary that we're in this Saturn-Uranus square that will end and begin a new cycle in 2032 with the conjunction of Saturn and Uranus.
Yes.
At the upraised arm of Orion. How symbolic is that?
Yeah, it is absolutely extraordinary. And even if we look at the archetypes of the Kuiper Belt objects, many of them have regeneration as part of our symbolism. If we look at, Haumea, who can birth babies from all over her body, regenerate the land, even when it was laid waste with poor agricultural practices. And so there's a sense of moving back to an understanding of regeneration, whether it's of self or of the earth, that I think could happen much more rapidly than we think, because it's not going to be 3D. We have to do A, then B, then C, then D. It's not going to happen in that way. Again, it's going to be something that's energetic, helped by celestial energy in some way. And that's why I have such hope.
Beautiful. So before we end, Pam, any other just guidance that you could give people? I mean, that part of what's so beautiful about that empowerment event that you held with your friend is that you talked about the big picture, but then you got very practical of how people could really work with this. So any other thoughts that you have about how we can stay in that alignment and hold that vision for what we're moving into and stay calm in the storm?
Yes, I think just very simply, do not go into fear under any circumstances. Turn off external inputs like the news, because very often they can be quite fearful, and have a practice that at least once a day, but ideally more often, turns you inwards. Whether it's breath work, whether it's very simply watching your breath, whether it's meditation, whether it's candle gazing that settles your energy right down, whatever it is, find something that works for you. So you just have this sense of, I have my anchor, I have my center, and everything in life comes from that. I'm not buffeted by the external. In fact, I can screen out the external because I am determined day to day by the state of being I decide, by tuning into that inner radio dial. And so that's the big thing, I think. And then it's, as I say, very simple because you've only got one thing to focus on. And a much greater sense of empowerment because it's coming from you. It's not being imposed upon you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think the other things I would add to that is, this shift in the precessional cycle that we're in is related to the way in which our sun orbits Sirius, our binary star. And again, in ancient Egyptian mythology, that's Isis, the Great Mother. So Sirius not only represents that connection to Isis, but also our connection to the galactic center, that source of all that is. So in the midst of this turmoil, I think it helps to know that we're held by the Great Mother, who's guiding us and supporting us. The wisdom and energy of the sacred feminine is coming back in this time to help us take in that love and sense of being held and carried and supported. And then I think it also helps us hold that compassion in our hearts and hold that compassion for ourselves. So in those moments where I do get caught in fear or angst or anxiety, when I can come back to that sense of the love of the cosmos and of the stars and of the earth holding us, and then hold that for myself, it helps me to calm down and then come back into that alignment and stillness. So, and I do think connecting with nature is key.
Yeah, that is really beautifully said, Heather. Really beautifully said. And I think also maybe finally, that when difficult things are clearly unfolding in the world, and yes, they are a reality, they don't have to be yours. There is a choice. There are many, many realities that you can choose, determined by your frequency. So yes, that's happening, but it doesn't have to be yours. You're going to create
Beautifully said.
over here.
Beautifully said. Stay in the witness self, see it, but don't identify with it. Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly that. So,
Well, thank
I love
you.
our conversations, Heather. They're so rich, and boy, we never quite know where they're going, but they're profound. Yeah.
Well, wonderful to do this with you again. And thank you for the energy that you're holding, Pam, and how you and support others in being in this energy.
Oh, bless you, Heather. And I adore the work that you're doing because you really do take us out to this expanded consciousness in your work. And that is so precious. And that's where we're headed. So you give us great hope for the future too.
Thank you.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Have a wonderful trip.
Thank you. And blessings to you and blessings to everyone listening.
Bye, everyone. Bye for now.